Mr. Speaker. Some weeks ago, when we had our parliamentary session here, I made a statement in Parliament concerning the government's commitment to providing treatment abroad. And in my statement, I alluded to the assistance rendered to someone I thought was a dear friend, Dave Lester Payne, and I should say Mr. Dave Lester Payne, and he was called by someone, allegedly, stating that I had indicated issues in the government's outreach to him, and instead of getting the facts of what I said, he went on the radio and was quite abusive. My purpose this morning is not to respond to the abuse, but to lay the facts on the table. And I will make this a record of Parliament. So I called the Secretary of the Board and asked her to give me a report, which I will share with the Parliament this morning. And it says, from current Tanis Executive Secretary, Medical Benefits Board, to Sir Molwyn Joseph, Honorable Minister of Health, Ministry of Health, Wellness and the Environment, Monday the 21st February 2022. Subject, medical financial assistance for Dave Lester Payne. On the 30th of November 2017, the Honorable Minister of Health, Sir Molwyn Joseph, called Mr. Osbert Frederick, the Chairman of Medical Benefits Board, requesting that medical financial assistance for flight, accommodation and meals and incidentals be awarded to Mr. Dave Lester Payne to undergo treatment in Lisbon, Portugal. Minister Joseph alerted Mr. Frederick that the supporting Cabinet Decision 117 of 23rd November 2017 would be forwarded. Notably, MBS Board facilitates funding only for treatment. However, in extenuating circumstances, funding for flight and accommodation has been approved. In that instance, considering the request by the Minister of Health and the urgency of Mr. Payne's status, approval was done via polling that very afternoon, since the board was not scheduled to meet until 2 weeks later. Mr. Dave Lester Payne was awarded $8,000 for flight, accommodation, and incidentals to undergo treatment in Lisbon, Portugal. On Friday the 1st, December 2017, Mr. Payne came to MBS to collect the first check to pay for his accommodation and meals and incidentals, which was EC $3,989, as he was scheduled to leave the following day. However, there was an issue with the amount, since according to him, he was to receive $8,000 plus airfare. The airfare, EC dollars $4,062, was paid to World Star Travel. He queried this with the Cabinet, and an amended decision was received, number 157. Mr. Payne requested that the additional amount of $4,062 be placed in his account. I explained that this amount could not be placed on his account without an official request from him. He requested that I quickly draft one for him, and I did. And he signed. My assistance in this regard is customary, as it is not unusual for a beneficiary to make that request of me. After the official request was received, Mr. Payne's account information was requested to facilitate additional transfer of funds. Mr. Payne was also told that the documentation regarding accommodation and acceptance for treatment at the medical facility would be needed before disbursement of the second check could be made. MBS received documentation regarding acceptance for treatment, letter from Dr. Thwaites and Dr. Gordon, and accommodation in the form of a folio from the hotel. A second check was dispersed into his account as a direct deposit on the basis that he submits the receipt for his accommodation and incidentals upon his return to Antigua, and that is required for transparency. Despite numerous calls to Mr. Payne, no receipts were returned to MBS, and consequently, his file remains open. And this took place all the way back in December, and we are now in the month of March. And the information was given. The amounts dispersed to Mr. Payne are as follows. Royal Bank check 140505, dated the 1st December 27 for EXD $3,938. Royal Bank check number 140950, dated 12 December 2017 for $4,062. And Royal Bank check number 149504, dated 1st December 2017, EXD 4062, paid to World Star Travel. And it says, should you have any questions or concern, please don't hesitate to contact me. And this was presented by the board secretary. Of course, in the public space, Mr. Payne said he only received $4,000. That's false. He received $8,000, Mr. Speaker, and the airfare, which amounted to $12,000 overall. Now, to show you the progression of this, Mr. Speaker, is that on the 23rd of November 2017, I have a cabinet decision here. The cabinet said, cabinet agreed that medical benefit scheme should meet the expense in the amount of $8,000 to cover Dave Lester Payne airfare, hotel accommodation at Palacio de Governador Hotel, meals and incidental in Lisbon. What happened after this cabinet decision was made? Mr. Payne made representation and said, no, it is going to cost more, and here is the evidence. He showed a pro forma invoice from the hotel. And then cabinet went back and said, on the 29th of November, cabinet revisited his decision of number 117 of 23rd November 2017, and agreed that the medical benefit scheme should cover the cost of Dave Lester Payne's airfare, in addition to covering the cost of hotel accommodation and meals in Lisbon, Portugal, in the amount of $8,000. So he got the first airfare of over $4,000, another $8,000 makes $12,000, Mr. Speaker. The issue here is that Mr. Payne has said openly that the government only assisted him with $4,000. That is false. According to the records of MBS, he got just over $12,000 for assistance abroad. I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that I am not inclined to get embroiled in these public spats. But what is important is that there is an attempt, island-wide, especially in this season, to portray the government as not caring, Mr. Speaker. And I want to make it clear that this government had to reverse a policy of the previous government where they suspended the assistance abroad for Antiguans and Barbudans in 2004. So had that requirement for assistance made by Dave Lester Payne during that time, and as a matter of fact, his illness dates back to 2013. He would not have gotten the assistance because the UPP government has suspended that assistance. It was re-established, Mr. Speaker, in 2014. And between 2014, as I stand here now, this government's policy has resulted in medical benefits assisting Antiguans to go abroad by the tune of $23 million. $23 million since 2014. And Dave Lester Payne was a recipient of that policy of government. And his treatment, including everything, cost almost 400,000 EC dollars. 400,000 EC dollars. And let me say, for an uncaring government, how this incident happened. 400,000, I will explain. There was a negotiation going on, Mr. Speaker, with an Indian gentleman who had an interest in the facility in Lisbon, Portugal. He came to Antigua, had a meeting with the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister was negotiating for them to bring that technology here to Antigua and Barbuda as part of the cancer center treatments at our local cancer facility. And it was in that discussion the Prime Minister welcomed him and asked him if we have a case, would he extend the service to an Antiguan? When the man offered the service and said, yes, we will do it in Lisbon, Portugal, the Prime Minister called me and advised me that this service is available. And at that time, I had the request from Mr. Dave Lester Payne before me. And then I said, Mr. Prime Minister, the candidate that I would recommend for this service is Mr. Dave Lester Payne. And that is how Mr. Dave Lester Payne traveled from Antigua and Barbuda on the 3rd of December to Lisbon, Portugal, and got this treatment, which would have cost, if the government had to pay, about 400,000 EC dollars. And that is the position of the government. He took the opportunity to abuse me as the minister on radio, but that is okay. I just want the facts and to diffuse or deflect this issue that this government is not caring, Mr. Speaker. This is a caring government, and this minister is responsible for the execution of government policy, and nobody in this country can ever claim, if the treatment is not available in Antigua and Barbuda, that they are denied the treatment because the government refuses to provide the financial assistance. So I hope I make that matter clear, and I will submit that report to Parliament that was presented to me by medical benefits. The other information that's available, but I dare not go into those information because even under these circumstances, patients' privacy must be observed.